How should you talk to software engineers? How do you give them the right level of requirements, get them to have a conversation with you and collaborate and understand the product and why we're building it? That's what we're going to talk about today on Product Driven. To survive and thrive, you must adopt a product-driven mindset. And we're back for another episode of Product Driven. Very excited to be talking about a really important topic today, how to talk to the engineering team. And feel like it's the biggest problem in software development because most software developers, I feel like, act like order takers. And to change that, we've got to change how we talk to them. So I've got an expert with me today. Josh Herzig-Marx is here. He's a coach, helps early stage founders, tech teams, tech leaders solve some of these challenges. I ran across Josh actually in a great Slack channel, engineering leadership channel, and reached out to him. Like, hey, you are the expert, exactly what I want to cover here on Product Driven. So Josh, welcome to the show, man.
It's great to be here. It's great to have a chance to actually connect after being in conversations and channels on Rand's Leadership Slack.
Yeah. How do you like that Slack group?
I love it. It's really one of two that I spend a lot of time in. Honestly, it's not one that's a big fit for me professionally. As you know, it's more focused on engineering leadership. It tends to be a little bit more big company driven. I'm a product manager. I coach product managers. I mentor product managers. I mentor founders. It tends to be lighter weight in those areas. But I love the people that I meet. I like the conversations that we have. And I use it, honestly, it's been a replacement for my social media, which is extremely healthy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're off of LinkedIn and stuff? Like you're only in Rand's?
I'm not off of LinkedIn. I occasionally have the clever spicy take, which goes semi-viral on LinkedIn. But, LinkedIn is for fun. This is for fun. And it's, goodbye Twitter, goodbye X, goodbye Facebook. Blue Sky is boring. I'm good. Yeah.
Well, we're talking about, for those of you listening who've not heard of it, we're talking about Rand's, R-A-N-D-S, Leadership Slack. You can Google that. It's a cool thing. You have to apply to get into it and they let you in, whatever, but it's really cool. So tell me, where do we start? How to talk to engineering teams? Like when you're working with early stage founders and tech companies, like what are the problems that you almost always see?
Sure. So first, let's contextualize this. I deal with very early stage companies. I advise companies that are pre-seed, so often not a whole lot more than just a founder and a good idea or a bad idea and a couple of bucks to get themselves started. I have a lot of those conversations. They're really fun. I was a mediocre founder myself once upon a time, so I enjoy having those. And then my own clients tend to be seed stage, Series A, Series B, still pretty small. Not many that cross the 200 employee line. So these are very early stage companies. And these companies are busy. They are fast changing. They're trying to compete in, no doubt, an incredibly competitive market. They're constantly learning, right? That's what a startup is. It's moving up the learning curve as fast as they possibly can. They are dynamic. And everybody's trying to work as efficiently as possible. And I would say the dangerous idea that's in many founders' heads, many product managers' heads, frankly, many engineering leaders' heads, is that there's some kind of perfect documentation, perfect requirement doc, perfect PRD, perfect spec. And if you write the perfect document and hand it over to somebody, they're going to build what they need to build.
Which is complete bullshit.
It's complete. Well, it's more than that. It's dangerous, right? It's dangerous because you can definitely write better and better documents, but better and better documents don't get you closer or closer to what needs to get built. And one of the things that I coach everybody on, I'm kind of an evangelist for, is the goal of these documents and these artifacts that you're creating isn't to better communicate, it's to have better conversations.
Right. It's the start of the conversation.
That's right. It's the start of the conversation. And sometimes a tool for improving the quality of conversations, right? I don't like to say documents. I should say artifacts, right? They can be everything from a Google Doc or a Word doc to something in, Linear, something in Jira. It can be, a picture in Miro or FigJam. It could be what I really like because I'm old. Sticky notes up on a wall. These are all examples of artifacts that people can use. These could be design docs. These could be clickable prototypes. But the goal of these things is to have better conversations with your engineering team?
Well, I think so at full scale, we've got 250 plus software developers.
Okay.
And the big thing that I always really focus on with the team is a key part of their job is asking the questions, right? Like you get the requirements, you've got to ask the questions. You've got to clarify, validate assumptions, figure out what are we working on, how are we working on it, validating all these assumptions as well, right? And bringing their knowledge to bear.
Yeah.
And I feel like the reason I laugh at this is to me personally, I feel like there is product requirements are not technical requirements. There's a ginormous difference, right? Like you can give me the product requirements, but then I have to take and figure out how do we actually build this and the like 20 to 30 different things that have to go through my head to figure out how we could build it, right? Just performance, scale, authentication, logging, error handling, like all these different things that probably aren't in the product requirements. Does that make sense?
I hope not. Like, if those are in the project requirements, you have some amateur like me who doesn't know what he's talking about trying to tell some expert like you who's done this a dozen times, 24 times, like how to build things. That's a miss, right? Generally speaking, your engineers are some of the smartest, most dedicated, hardest working people in your organization.
They should be.
If you aren't, they should be, right? I mean, they went to school. They're quantitative. They can code. These are all things that I really respect that I can't do, right? I'm a terrible engineer. So if you're not engaging them in the how to do, obviously you're really failing, right? But more than that, I love the idea of pulling people leftward in the process. How do you engage them in what to do as well? They have experiences. They ideally will understand the company needs, the company vision, company strategy. They'll understand market needs. They'll understand user needs. They have used software themselves as well, and you can have interesting conversations. You talked about, stuff like login, right? There's a lot of choices for login today. We can do username and password. Do we need to include a two-factor? Can we skip the password and do passwordless login with just like a magic link or a code? Do we send that via SMS? Do we send that via email? What are the trade-offs over there? What about federated login, right? Login with Apple, login with Google, login with Microsoft. If we do those, should we still require two-factor authentication? What are the trade-offs in terms of security, performance, user acceptance, and all those sorts of things? That's an awful lot to be putting onto my head as a product manager, or worse yet, a founder's head who's ever done this thing before.
Yeah,
and you have this entire company full of people, right?
Yeah.
Who do this, especially in your case. Your engineers have done this for dozens of clients. What an opportunity to leverage all of that wisdom.
Well, I really love that you mentioned the word trade-offs, because I feel like as a senior developer, somebody who's got 5 to 10 years of experience, or an engineering leader, it feels like that's a lot of what we manage all day long is trade-offs, right? Is trying to identify, am I doing this like quick and dirty, or is this like military grade? Am I trying to get something real quick to market, right? Like is a simple username and password the right thing? Or do I need like 10 single sign-on and SAML integration and all this stuff, right? It's like, that's where it requires a lot of collaboration and conversation to figure out what are the trade-offs. Like give us like good, better, best, help us understand the timeline and maybe where we could move quicker if we made some trade-offs and did something else.
Yeah. So I think about those conversations as being a team skill or an organizational skill, in the sense that it's not enough for one person to be good at it, but it's something which the whole team has to practice getting good at. I know I'm the guest on your podcast, but I have been looking forward to asking you this question. It's like, how do you do that with a team of folks that haven't necessarily met before, where there is this sort of complex outsourced relationship already, which can impact, how folks interact? How do you take that and how do you start to build that kind of team culture, team language shared with a founder, right? How do you train a founder and train a team up quickly to be able to work together in that sort of a way? How do you develop that team skill?
So I think there's definitely two sides of it. You've got the engineering side, right, which to some degree can only do what they can do, right? They're not the boss, they're not the leader, they're not the executive. And then you've got the leadership side of it. For us on the engineering side, the big thing that we focus on is teaching them to have courage, teaching them to speak up, ask the questions, challenge things, validate assumptions, right? Like they have to have the courage. That's the first thing, the courage to speak up and ask those questions. And some of them honestly don't.
Okay.
Right? They just sit around waiting to be told what to do. and they don't have the courage to step up and be like, you know what, this is not a good idea, or here's some other options, some other things we should consider. Being engaged and involved in those conversations, right? But from a leadership perspective, I think that's the key, is you've got to kind of beat that drum and set that stage of like, hey, we're going to have these kinds of conversations. We want you engaged in these kind of conversations. And this is a safe space to have those kinds of conversations.
Yes, the safe space part. I think that's really important because founders often forget, executives often forget, like every expression, every word, sometimes every look on the face is being carefully parsed.
Yeah.
And, you know, your team knows if you're happy with them or not happy with them. It's like kids, right? You and I are both parents, right? Our kids have been watching us their entire lives to interpret our moods and expressions.
Yeah.
Right. Actual, you know, business work isn't quite that dramatic, but it's very similar. And it's really easy to kill that, right? You know, you can kick off a relationship, you can kick off a meeting, you can hire somebody who, you know, is committed to that kind of inquiry, that kind of questioning and pushing back, you know, but one thoughtless word by the CEO or by the product manager, and you can kill that vibe, right? You can set the whole team back. Do you talk about that with your clients in advance? Is that a topic that comes up, or do you have to deal with it as it happens?
Not necessarily. You know, as part of Product Driven, I'm in the process of building some courses and things, and some of those will be courses for our clients at full scale and our employees specifically, but also building courses for other people. But some of these are just general like management leadership things to know and understand, right? And you hit on an important point about body language and tone and all these things which are important. And actually, one of our episodes that actually aired today when we're filming this was about how I think async communication is difficult and sometimes not a positive.
Yeah.
And how we need meetings with people, like we need the meetings. And part of it is for what you just said. Like, I want to be able to tell the engineer that I need you to go do X, Y, and Z. And I want to see the look on their face to see if they look confused or do they understand what I just told them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you can't do that over asynchronous text communication. You know, they're real collaboration and conversation has to happen in this way.
Yeah. I think I'm glad you talked about sync versus async. I think the thing that brought us together was I shared a presentation that I deliver to founders. It's a 15-minute presentation, and it's sort of an introduction to user story mapping, which is, again, makes my old heart sing because it involves putting Post-it notes up on a wall, my favorite thing to do, right? But it's this very structured technique developed so that you can map out what the expected user experience is going to be, and then have someone stand next to you and ask you questions and try to move things around. It's just kind of very tactile. It gives an affordance of engagement. So like this question of like, how do we have better conversations? Well, we don't do it by writing something up in a Slack message or an email and handing it over. We do it by giving somebody a artifact that invites that kind of engagement. Is that something which you guys use? Do you use user story mapping or something similar to that when you're setting stuff up? Or have you found a template that works really well for you and your teams?
Well, at full scale, it's really how our clients work. I mean, we kind of assimilate to however they work, and we've got giant, publicly traded companies to little bitty startups and everywhere in between. So we don't really do things our way. We do things however our clients want to do things.
Okay, so I know you love all your clients equally, but is there one structure or format that you found is easier to work with for you and your teams that you prefer?
I'm not sure I really have a specific answer for that one. Yeah.
I'm putting you in a hard place. I apologize for that. I think about the nature of affordances a lot, right? Like in a document, your affordance is putting a comment in or possibly changing things, right? Because that's what Google Docs is all about. You can comment, you can edit, and that's pretty much where you land. If you start to do things like move chunks of text around in really big ways, it kind of breaks. It becomes impossible to read. It's hard to keep track of what the changes are. It's hard to talk over in a Google Doc. I think I found that like prototypes, if there's one really easy fix that my clients are able to do, it's to share the prototypes with the engineering team before you share them with the executive team.
Okay.
particularly clickable prototypes, again, the affordance is you're using it and you're still commenting on things, but the flow is more natural and people can kind of understand like, oh, I understand what we're supposed to be doing here because somebody's walking through it. But I really like this idea of separating out the prototype in the flow and describing it in words in a way that's easy for people to move around. So, I use an example of, in my own work, the example I use is like waking up in the morning, getting ready for work, and going to the office and getting yourself settled at your desk, a thing which most people have experienced at some point. And you kind of think through what the steps are. Your alarm goes off, you stand up, you shower, you dry off, you get dressed, you shave. Okay, shaving, great. When does that happen? Does that happen beforehand? For somebody who uses an electric razor, they might shave before they shower. Does it happen afterwards if you wet shave? Well, not everybody shaves. Not everybody grows facial hair. Some people who do grow facial hair don't want to shave. Is this an important step? Is this not important? Can we leave it out? What about breakfast? Do you eat breakfast at home? Do you eat breakfast on the way? Do you make your coffee at home? Do you make your coffee on the way? Do you buy your coffee to Starbucks? How do all these things happen? And is it important for our, quote, MVP of waking up in the morning and going to the office? Are all these steps equally important? Can we get someone to the office, a minimum viable wake up? I'm not quite sure what to call it exactly, but we'll talk through this example, right? It's a useful story because people can relate to it, and then we can start to move things around. And I like this because you can imagine that person next to you standing there staring at the wall, looking at all the steps necessary to get somebody out of bed and sitting at their desk doing work. And you can imagine that engineer, standing up and saying, you see this one over here where it says get into your car? I don't know that everybody gets in a car to get to the office. We have a few different ways, right?
Yeah.
Is this the one we want to be starting with? Do we have to start with this? Because I think we can get somebody to the office a lot faster, right? If we're only focusing on those people who live within walking distance of where they work. Like, oh, that's a great point. We've just narrowed down our ICP. We've simplified our MVP dramatically. We're building less stuff, right? We're not getting cars into the mix or parking garages or anything like that, right? It's a much easier story to tell. And I got that because there's an engineer who was able to stand next to me and have that conversation.
Well, I think you highlight something really important here is the power of stories. Like we all learn better from a story.
Yeah.
And even with software development, it's like explaining the why in a way that is more relatable and more memorable. So for example, I recently built some software for plumbers, right? And so it's easy to say, okay, we need to have a mobile app, build a mobile app versus like, okay, no, you have to understand our customer is a plumber and the only time they can use this, they're probably wearing gloves or they had a 5-minute break in their car while they're driving between their clients.
Yeah.
Right. And then that story, I think, always tells like a different picture, right? Like people can better relate to like, oh, okay, now I really understand why you said we needed a mobile app. Like now that makes more sense.
I agree. I think stories are fantastic.
I think that's something that gets missed a lot, probably in a lot of requirements, right? They're like, just do this thing.
I'm a big fan of written stories, but they are also dangerous, right? So did you have a favorite book growing up as a kid? Were you like...
I hate reading books.
Okay. You weren't like maybe like a Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe kid growing up, or maybe Harry Potter or one of those? Okay, so maybe you can't empathize with this, but I remember when the Harry Potter books came out. I was in college. I was like, a camp counselor, and you had all these kids walking around camp with like these like black eyes because they were reading the books and they were like running into trees as they were like read as they walked around these books. Kids were obsessed with this, right? And everybody in their head had a little bit of a different idea of what Harry Potter looked like. Yeah. And what Voldemort looked like and what Hogwarts looked like and all these like different things. And like some kids had been to England, so they had a sense of like what these trains would be like, and some kids hadn't been. They had their own pictures inside of their head. J.K. Rowling is an amazing author with like, she writes clearly, she has amazing detail. Everybody had a very clear picture inside of their head of what these Harry Potter books looked like. Everybody's picture was a little bit different. They could still talk about it, right? These kids would talk about Harry Potter and Hermione Granger and everybody endlessly, right? All the kids loved it, but they all had a little bit of a different picture. And then the movies came out. And all of a sudden, every Harry Potter looks like, I'm blanking on the actor's name, right? All of a sudden, everybody who's reading the books now, it looks like that guy. Yeah. Right? And Hermione Granger looks like...
Your imagination is gone.
Which is, bad if you're a kid and fantastic, right? If you're a software developer, because all of a sudden we're all sharing the same picture. So I do actually recommend that my clients start with a story. And I want it to be a compelling story. I want to make sure they include all the details for jobs to be done. Who's the story about? Who's the hero in the story? Where are they? When are they? What are they doing? What prompts them to go through this process? Like, I want a really, really good story. But I don't want them to think that writing the story is going to be enough, because there's going to be things that are missing. Google did a really good job of this when I was there. If they were rolling out a new product, what they would do is they would make an ad for it, essentially. Like, that was their vision. Their product vision would be an advertisement showing somebody actually using the thing that they were building. So I was involved with, Google had a pay by face at restaurants product that I was involved with when I was over there.
Okay.
And it was cool. Then it got a little bit complicated. Then it got too expensive and it got killed. It was neat. I enjoyed working on it. But they had this, for I think it was probably just for internal purposes only. They probably shared it a little bit externally with partners, a little bit of partner marketing as well. But they had like a short ad that was a mom dragging two kids into a restaurant, and the kids are like hanging off her arms. She's putting the order in, and when it comes time to pay, she's not digging in her purse. The person behind the counter says, "Mrs. Smith?" And she's like, "Yes." He's like, "Would you like to pay with Google?" She says, "Yes." And that's it. And she walks out. And I just told you that story. You have a picture inside of your head, but like being able to see it out there gives the engineers, gives the entire team a better opportunity to like,
they know what the end goal looks like, right?
Yeah. To what is really going on here, right? And they understand, oh yeah, it's the kids hanging off. I understand why this is a savings.
Yeah.
And you can look around to the cashier side. You can see the little device next to the point of sale terminal with the pictures of the people in the store who are a match. And I don't remember how the system worked. I'm making stuff up now, but whatever it is, like you can like see all those concrete bits, and then they can ask a question, right? They can say, "Hey, the point of sale terminal is just a Windows computer. Do we have to have a second device? Can we run this inside of the point of sale terminal?" And the product manager says, "I don't know. That's a great question. Let's go find out." And I think the visual has that extra possibility of driving good questions. Anyway, that's my pitch for the story is really important, but making it a visual story, I think is extra important. I think people
definitely learn a lot more from some sort of visual. A lot of us are visual learners. Like if we can see it.
You're the person who told me you didn't like reading books. Yeah.
I know. I hate
You shouldn't have to. Yeah.
Because I have ADHD, maybe a little bit like you do.
I have a whopping case.
So a lot of us do. We're all in the spectrum somewhere, but I'm curious, most of the people that come to you, like, how do they find you, or what is the problem that they're having when they reach out to you? Like, how does this manifest and they come to you, and then what you're helping them with?
Sure. My short spiel about the kind of work that I do is I'm just a B2B provider like you are. And as, B2B businesses, we only have 4.5 ways of, reaching people. It can be performance marketing. It can be direct selling. It can be referrals and virality. It can be content/inbound. And if you're lucky, there's some kind of marketplace or sell through that lets you acquire customers. For me, it's always been content driven. I participate heavily in communities where my kinds of customers, these are product managers at startups or founders of startups, tend to hang out and ask a lot of questions. And I just go and try to be helpful, kind of like that thread that we found inside of
I found
RLS. You. Yeah, that's how you found me. That's not where my customers hang out. So again, that's why it's a fun one for me. But Lenny Rachitsky runs a private paid Slack community. That's a great source for me. I try to be helpful. And people will reach out and they'll say things like, "Hey, Josh, I saw your response. That was really great. We're having a challenge. I am a product manager. I have 4 years of experience. I'm reporting into the CEO. This is their first startup. I need more support." Right? Or a CEO will come to me and say something like, "My engineers keep telling me they need to hire a product manager. I'm not sure what that's all about. Can we chat?" And enough of those turn into clients that, my kids can afford, food. So.
Well, let me ask you this. For a lot of these early stage companies that you're dealing with, do you feel like they have more challenges on the product side or the technology side?
I'll answer a slightly different question. The two biggest challenges that companies seem to have, one is the founders or the executive team having a hard time articulating a clear enough company strategy that they can really improve it, right? Because again, if you can't articulate it clearly, it's really hard to give feedback. It's really hard to learn. So that's one challenge on the executive side. The second challenge is almost always on the engineering side. Whoever is the current acting engineering leader, whether it's somebody experienced or inexperienced, feels overwhelmed. The engineering team itself feels overwhelmed. They feel like they're kind of in a constant death march, never-ending goals, demands for more and more stuff to be pushed out there, and they don't feel like they have the time or the space or the safety to truly understand the business's needs, the market and the market needs, the customer and the customer needs. And as a result, they are always going back to somebody else, designer, founder, product manager, with infinite questions. They feel like, and they know they are releasing software that doesn't really meet the expectations that were originally set. The impact isn't where they wanted it to be. And transforming that engineering side of the organization is really important.
So, are you able to usually help them solve those problems?
Sometimes. If there is a engineering leader who is interested in solving those problems, it's often pretty straightforward.
So what are the key tips on that you would give them to help solve those problems?
Tip number one is you need to recognize that your engineering team isn't fungible. This is a skilled task, right? Engineering, building software products is as much art as it is science. And you can't keep changing things around on people all the time, and there's a limit to how much people are able to ship, right? Your tiny little 4-engineer team is not going to be able to feature match everything that a 400 or 4,000 person company is going to be able to match. So that's number one, is to set expectations appropriately, which is almost always code for do fewer things.
Okay.
Number two is bring your engineering team in earlier. I talk about shifting quality leftwards. So it's common to bring your engineering team in when it's time to figure out how to implement a design, but you should be bringing your engineering team in when you're actually doing solution or software design. You should be bringing them in when you're doing product discovery. You should be bringing them in when you are doing opportunity identification, right? Selecting which problems, which opportunities you want to build against. Like all of those things, you should have your engineering team in the room, which of course means they're going to spend less time coding, but that's okay. Right, so shifting the quality.
They spend less time confused and blocked because when they get confused about something, they can think back to like, oh yeah, we talked about this thing. I'm pretty sure I know what we need to do.
Yeah. The phrase I use with CEOs is imagine at your quarterly board meeting and you stand up there and you pull up your first slide and you say, I have some good news and some bad news. And your board of directors goes, okay, good news and bad news, that's to be expected. Why don't you give us the bad news first? And the bad news is we didn't ship this new functionality that we committed to some big clients. We're seeing increased churn. Software went down a little bit. That's causing some concerns as well. We're losing deals because we don't have the product market fit we thought we had. The board of directors goes, oh my God, that's terrible. But you said there's some good news too, and you're like, yeah, our engineers are working a solid 50 hours a week coding, and we got 1 million features released. Nobody cares, right? Like your job isn't as a startup isn't to write software and to release features. Your job is to create value and capture some of that in the form of revenue. Create value for your customers and capture that. Yeah, outcomes are what's important. And that's not just true for the CEO in the board meeting. That should be true for the entire organization. Yeah. So I try to help them rethink it that way.
All right, you got a third tip?
Yeah. The third tip is to try less hard to make perfect documents. So if I'm successful by...
You mean requirements documents?
Sure, or anything at all. Yeah, but requirement documents. So... when I was coming up as a product manager, user stories were the thing, and product managers were expected to write user stories. I think that's still fairly common. I no longer write user stories, and I try really hard to keep my clients from writing user stories. The product managers that I work with for writing user stories, they write things at the epic level now, typically. And it's the engineers who write the user stories, who decompose it themselves. There's a couple things. One is engineers will ideally have a better sense for how they want to decompose large chunks of work into small chunks of work in a way that makes sense for them, right? They should be responsible for how they work. But more than that, it forces questions, right? What's my goal is higher quality conversations. A question is a really
that.
high quality conversation. So, yep, here's a high level epic. It has a great story in it, right? A great narrative with a hero and a goal and some obstacles to overcome, like every great story has. It maybe makes specific, some of the non-functional requirements, which are easy to forget. Like, we got to have analytics inside of this thing. And, don't forget, this is payment data, so the payment data's got to be secure. A couple of hints like that. It's got some placeholders for where the mocks go and the clickable prototypes. But fundamentally, that's what you're delivering. And you're handing it off, and, go engineering team, you figure out what those user stories are going to be. And now we have a conversation. They can ask lots of questions. They can share what they've done. I can give feedback, and we're talking, and it's great.
Love it.
So 3 concrete suggestions. They're all pretty easy. The hard thing is actually doing it.
Well, and doing it every week, right? Like, we know in all phases of life, most things are all about the fundamentals. Like, even if you're a professional quarterback, right? It's about your feet and this and that.
That's right.
It's all about the fundamentals. And we all need to remember to do those. And some weeks we're better than others at different fundamentals. And that's why, as a leader, we have to keep beating that drum too, of like, these are the things we need to do, and keep reminding people that these are the things we need to do, even though
You know what? That's a great. I actually like this analogy a lot. I watch a lot of kids' sports. My daughters are not particularly athletic. Sorry, girls. But they're very enthusiastic and they love practicing. And I watch, first middle school soccer, middle school basketball. Now it's high school soccer, high school basketball, tennis, ultimate frisbee. And, at this level of play, the teams that win are the teams that A, have the best conditioning, right? Who are able to sustain effort across the entire game, number 1. And number 2, are the fewest unforced errors. Certainly at the level that my kids are playing. And that's probably true for most startups as well, right? Really what you're betting on is the vision and the insight that the founders of the company have. And if that's correct, if they have a good vision, if they have good insight, then you just can't go and screw it up, which means can you keep your process going for the months, the quarters, the years, until you find product market fit and really kind of hit that curve in your growth? That's number 1. And number 2 is, can you avoid doing the dumb stuff?
Keep from making those big errors.
Keep from making the big mistakes. Yeah.
Yep. Well, I really appreciate having you on the show today. I think this has been a great episode, talking about working with developers and requirements and all these different things. If people want to learn more about you and how you could help them, where should they go?
Absolutely. So first off, my parents gifted me with amazing SEO. So you can go ahead and Google my name, Josh Herzig-Marx, and I'm easy to find. But if you want something even easier, you can go to jhm.lol. That's my personal website. It's got links to my coaching. It's got links to what I'm up to today, links to some other podcasts I've been on. And you can learn more about me over there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this. And reminder for those earlier, we mentioned the RANDS Slack group too, which is really good.
RLS, RANDS Leadership Slack. You can Google that too. If you can't find it, message me and I'll kick you a link.
All right. Thank you, guys. We'll see you on the next one.
Take care. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning into Product Driven today. If you're passionate about building user-centric tech products, join over 30,000 tech leaders who receive the Product Driven newsletter directly in their inbox every week. Visit fullscaleteam.com/newsletter to sign up today for our newsletter. You can also view all of our episodes on YouTube and join over 50,000 others. And please follow me, Matt Watson, on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.